So hi, how's it going? I can't really see anyone. I can see a few people. Thanks for coming. Before I start, I just kind of want to know who I have. Do I have any like indie dev producer types? It's just really hard to see. Okay, cool. And any there we go. Any sort of directors? There, okay. You'll be learning something hopefully. And any students or people who haven't worked in game dev before? Okay, you're going to be way ahead of everyone. Okay, so I'll just go into this. One thing I want to start with is like I was chatting last night with somebody, and they were saying, good process is freedom. And I thought that was a really good way to introduce the talk. So, if you've got good process, you've got good limitations, it means that you're creating a stable atmosphere which reduces anxiety, which means your team are going to be more autonomous and more creative, more problem solving. So that's kind of what this talk is about. But before I go too much into it, so in case you don't know, I'm Jason Hickey, I'm an art director. I was art director on Spider-Man 2, on Spider-Man Miles Morales, and before that I was a lead environment artist on Spider-Man, lead artist on Rise, and I've been around for about 20 years. A couple of years ago, I started doing consultation for indie studios, AAA studios, so I worked with Creative Assembly, PlayStation London Studios, Kailan in Vietnam, and a bunch of other people. And I've noticed a bunch of trends, so that's where this talk came from, to help people overcome the challenges, right? And there's a bunch of stuff. If you want to talk about any of these things, you can hit me up. The socials will be at the end, and we can continue the conversation. So, yeah. Okay, what's the spec? First of all, spot the AI. There's going to be some AI images in this, and they're going to have this little tiny version of this on the image. If you see it, you're more than welcome to do some pantomime AI and point out the images if you can recognize them on time. I've tested this on my business partner and he got everything. So you've got a tough challenge to follow. So I've talked about who this is for, but it's mainly about really improving the pipelines, or at least questioning your pipelines in your process. So anyone who can learn from that. If your processes are all fine, then you don't need to come to this talk. It'll be in 3 sections. First is about understanding the problem statement. Second will be talking about the solution that I'm proposing, and then it'll be about preparation, sort of getting to prepare for the known unknowns. So yeah, without further ado, jump in. So problem statement. Our very busy directors are not signing off on time, leading to delays, missed milestones, scope reduction, team frustration, and increased cost. And this sort of sounds like a bottleneck problem. Second kind of problem statement might be our developers don't have enough information and need constant communication with leadership to get answers. So that's sort of like an ambiguous vision or not clear kind of vision problem. So we've got bottlenecks and ambiguity. Bottleneck, in case the language isn't clear, is situation resulting from too many deliveries, requiring too many approvals from not enough people. So everything is funneled. I tried to find images, animal-related images, to convey this. Yeah, you got one. You cheat. So bottleneck. This is my first attempt at an animal, which is, it's not really a bottleneck, it's just a dog. This one's a little bit better. And then ambiguity is no clarity of vision, direction, or purpose of what must be done. So everyone has a mixed idea, maybe. This was easier to find. And I imagine all of you have, if you work in games, that expression is quite common, at least inside. And we hope to reduce that as much as possible, even though it's cute. So how does it manifest? So one of the things is sort of directors as bottlenecks. Now, just to be clear, I'm a director, right? So this isn't an assault on the directors, out you. It's your fault. But what we're trying to do is raise accountability for direction so that everybody kind of knows what's expected, right? So that there's more time, take stuff off their plates as well. So directors don't have enough time because there's just too much stuff to do, right? What that could manifest in is that they're reviewing something too late. So for example, it's alpha, everyone's raring to go, and the director comes in and go, I haven't seen this level yet. I want to remove that 10-minute traversal section from the game. And it's like, well, that would have been great if you'd said that, in pre-pro or in early production. So, they might be asking for something reasonable, but it's just too late in development. That's sort of a symptom of, bottlenecks. Poor buy-in. Symptoms of that is, the team don't understand why they're doing the feature, which can lead them to a difficulty in making the correct decisions. And in worst cases, it can kind of lead to pew pew. We need information. Give me information. Constantly asking, which actually creates bottlenecks in and of itself. And when that goes wrong, which it often does, it can kind of build resentment in the team because they don't feel included, or they don't feel they're being listened to, or they feel like their work, which is really stressful, nobody's acknowledging that's the case, and can lead to people leaving. So it's really serious. It may seem like not a big deal, but it's actually a really big problem in our game dev. Although lately people are getting thrown to the wind regardless. So times have changed slightly. Misunderstood vision. So deliveries don't match expectations. You want to have this, you get this. You are having quality or fidelity or style variation, like massive differences from one dev to the next. You're finding that you're bringing people from another project or new hires, and it's really difficult to get them going. That ramp-up time is way too long. And you may find that there's some people who get it, and you think, oh, well, I must be doing something right because those people get it. It's everyone else's fault. And as a director, obviously, that's our job to make sure everybody gets it. There's reasons that some people get it. It might be just on the same wavelength or the same way of communicating, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily doing it correctly. So, without clarity, you don't know what success looks like. You can be, end up being like, although I'm going to use art a lot, obviously, because I'm from an art background, this is for everybody, but, this is like a sad artist they're like, well, I'll just ask the boss, because I don't know what's going on. Then they won't be creative, and they won't have those creative problem-solving skills at their best. So this is the beef of this talk is how it looks. So the feature. I had too much coffee. The feature roadmap I'm going to go through, which is really just the visualization of process. We'll talk about gates, stakeholders, and the sort of major phases. So why the process? The process is boss because you're entering into a contract with your team that after, obviously a real contract, but like a virtual contract where you're saying, okay, we're all gonna work this way, right? Everyone agreed to that, cool. From now on, we follow what the process says. We don't get into egos, we don't get into changing as the wind changed. Oh, I played a game last night, now we need to do this thing in our game. It all follows a procedure. And what's good about that is we're building this kind of, board game AI kind of process, and we're building the responses to bottlenecks. How do we can get rid of the bottlenecks, where they're going to happen, where the poor buy-in, where the lack of vision comes from into that. So it's kind of, the process is helping us avoid this stuff. So I call it this evolve process because I think we can all, look at that and say, we know that there's a stage and you get to a prototype and then we have pretty good process in production, right? Everybody knows how to get from there to there, hopefully. I'm not going to go too much into that. So what I'm really talking about here is formalizing a lot of the start. So, having a concept phase and having these are the gates, okay, when there's going to be sign off before, so that there's process from beginning to end. And then you'll have, obviously, stage deliveries or their own mini processes within this larger framework, such as brainstorming, things like that. So what does this look like for reducing bottlenecks? So in a production where things are fairly ad hoc and it's a free-for-all, you can get micromanaging, which the director feels like, oh, I have to keep telling everyone what to do all the time, and it's a bit like that. And obviously, if you multiply that by 10 different features, like 5 levels, a boss, 5 puzzles, it all adds up, and there's not enough time for the director to give feedback. So what we're looking at doing is only having the director involved at those key stages, right? So the developers are now forced to solve for themselves in between. Ambiguity is the same. Don't really know what's going on, just going to ask questions the whole way through. So in this case, what we want to do is get a clear enough vision so we're pulling all of those questions and stuff right up to the front, right? We're front loading everything. So there should be less and less not clarity, obfuscation as you go through development. And then lastly, for buy-in, I've seen this quite a lot, especially for teams that are not directly doing the design, or if you're making a tool for the team, are not involved directly with that, they'll end up with a buy-in happening only after first pass when it's already out there, and there's not a lot of feedback they can give. So we're really looking, and this is the team, not director buy-in. We're really looking at getting that buy-in at those key stages and reinforcing that throughout development. Okay, so moving into the gates. So I call them phase gates, but essentially deliveries and sign-offs, okay? So what we want to identify here is this is where the leadership is the most accountable. So they're not going to do the work, but they're going to make sure the work gets done. So at each of these deliveries, directors, in this case, the first one, they're responsible for delivery, but you're getting sign-off at those points. But in order to deliver those, you're going to have stages, right? You're going to have a design delivery, you're going to have a feedback delivery, and they'll be owned. The responsible people who do the work will be feature group or UX team. You can call it a strike team, whatever. Doesn't really matter the language. You get the idea. So just quickly, just to go over, there's this RACI is a good way to. I suggest looking it up if you haven't heard of it. It's a good way of identifying who should be doing what and how people should be informed throughout production. But basically, you're going to have your feature group is responsible. We talked about the direction, the leadership. They're going to be accountable. Who gets consulted and who gets informed. So really quick, hopefully this is quite clear. A feature group owners are those that are responsible for delivering this process throughout, right? They could be, for art, they could be a level designer, but it could also be a narrative designer and level designer, and the environment artist could be the feature group owners. Ideally, it's not a director for obvious reasons, because the bottlenecks will multiply. Often with shared teams like VFX and things like that, you're going to have multiple features owned by a few people. So you've got to really watch that when you're doing your Gantt scheduling to make sure that those people aren't really creating new bottlenecks, and you're going to be consulting these people. Generally, it's like the principal designer, principal artist, principal coder, but also anyone who's affected by a feature. So, for example, if you're doing like a tool, like a terrain tool, so this happened on Spider-Man. We were doing a terrain tool to have more variation in height in the new stuff in Spider-Man 2, new areas. But at a certain point in development, I can't remember when, but let's say June, we knew that if we didn't have the tool by June, we wouldn't be able to build it all by hand, like without procedure until that point. So even though the tool may have come in July or August or whatever, we had to make a cutoff for that tool, because if it didn't come, we wouldn't be able to ship the game. So we had to make that choice, and that feature got shelved, and maybe it's going to be used for later projects, but you do have to have a cutoff. And the why did I say that? In order for the consultation is consulting the leadership team and the producers about the schedule, and the environment team about when the tool needs to be. There's no point doing a tool and it comes too late, right? So it's about getting those consultation experts. And then the rest of the team is not really stakeholder, but you want to you keep them informed, and that's really about keeping empathy. So when things go wrong, or you can't help someone with stuff, they know why. Everybody knows why you're making it, and it isn't like, oh, okay, well, they get all the extra resources again. It's more collaborative, and also because great ideas come from anywhere, which is something that is really espoused at Insomniac Games, and something I brought away with me. The more people you have informed, the more likely you're going to get interesting, creative solutions that might just pop out of somewhere you hadn't thought of. The design team might not even know as well. Okay, so going back to the big picture with a bit more complexity, there'll be close-ups of this, but this just to see, we're sort of dividing this into the 3 phases. So the director phase, the feature group phase, and production phase. The direction phase is really short. There's only 2 sort of stages, but it's really, really important because it sets up everything else. And the production phase is really long, but we're not going to talk about that too much because, as I said, it's like a pretty well-known and established way of working. The feature group phase is essentially about getting from the director's vision to the start of production. So director, quick note for here, the blue borders are the deliverable required to sign off at the yellow box, which is the gate. This is your big sign off. The red box is the purpose. So if you do take a picture, hopefully you can read it, you'll kind of remember what each stage is for. So director's really accountable and responsible at this point. So they're going to be making a vision document and then doing a kickoff. So one of the things I see a lot is that there's a general sort of idea of what your process your feature should be, and it's like people discuss it and then it kind of goes and people put it into a schedule, but there isn't a proper kickoff. It's really important that the director gets involved in the kickoff, right? No matter what the feature is, no matter what the delivery is. And you're going to be wanting to solve all this stuff, like why are you making it? So maybe you're making a level. Why is it? What's the problem statement? For example, you might make a level and it needs to be calm because the problem state would be the player has been playing intense action for some time. They need a break in order to reset and start the kind of narrative ramp up again. And then what? It's going to be a 10-minute long narrative-driven level, and there's only one artist can work on it for 4 weeks, whatever. Who's going to do it will be the feature group, so designer, level designer, artists, and stuff like that. Who's it for? Generally the player, but if it's a tool, like terrain tool would be for level designers and for the environment art team, I guess, and when it needs to be done for. And that stage ends once the kickoff is done. At that point, the buy-in, everybody on the leadership team is bought in, and also the feature group team is bought in, okay? Then you go into the feature owner phase. So this one is, I've broken it down into starting off with brainstorming. So you're taking that kickoff doc, you're finding out what the best solutions are to hit the director's vision. Then you're going to create the design doc. You're going to get it signed off. And then you'll probably have some caveats, like we'll do this level, but I don't know, for example, we know it's set in a factory, but how are we going to do 3 puzzles that use physics in a factory? And can you go out and solve those? And that would be your kind of next brainstorming session. Then you're going to obviously do the prototype, and you get sign off. So that ends with sign off on the prototype, and then you move into production. So make the game, deliver it, get it into the hands of the users. They're all happy. Just a reminder that the white boxes with the grey borders are the stages. I didn't say that earlier. There's a legend there, so you can read that. Right, speed bumps. Poor progress. This is if you don't know, that's AI. like, now, I didn't put a lot of effort into the AI tool, I have to say. Dancel Lager. Poor progress generally, which will be a production issue, right? Your process isn't working, so you need to, tweak it. Losing confidence or losing momentum sometimes is generally a buy-in issue. And then bad deliveries, it's quality. And we're going to look at production first. So generally speaking, you've got a bunch of ways. I don't want, I'm not going to go into everything, but these are the main things that you're going to look at in order to adjust, right? If you're getting issues with the production. So you want to scope early and often, and I really want to, it's not like throw baby out with the bathwater. Like it's not cutting. And I do think, yes, good. Everyone can say it if you want. AI, yeah, great. Now we got it. I didn't need to do this pantomime stuff. So there is a problem with this idea that, oh no, we have to scope, that means we have to cut its head off. Like that's not what we're talking about. Really, like the way I like to think of it is beautiful limitations. I think it is one term. There's a book about that. But necessity is the mother of invention. And there's some of the great stuff at Insomniac came from, we need to do this with less resources. And that suddenly turned into actually a much, much better design or a much better feature because of the scoping. So what you really need to do is look at that problem statement and go, right, well, we now have less time, we don't get VFX involved, or we're not going to get any extra UI. So how are we going to solve the same problem statement with less resources? So when you're thinking about scope, it isn't always the directors or the leads who should be thinking about it. Like the whole team should be going, can we do this cheaper? So you can avoid knock-on effects. So obviously, you can you outsource it? Could you delegate it? Is there another bottleneck on the team that's causing this problem that it won't get delivered? Really, really important. Don't cut unless you have to, because the amount of times I've been told we're going to cut this level or that level because we know art is there's too much art to do. And my response is, don't cut stuff, because now we're going to have to fill that gap with something else, and we don't know what that gap will be filled by and if it will be more expensive or less expensive. So, really let the people who are doing it decide what needs to be scoped to fit. And like, there's a bunch of things that get cut. Like, say for example, you might, we're going to stop climbing because it's too expensive to do climbing in the game. So what about all the sections in the game that don't have that traversal breakup? What are you going to replace that with? It's a huge knock-on effect, and just be really careful about that scoping. Fail fast. So this is about no time wasting, doing a prototype as quick as possible, basically getting to a point where you can see the promise of what you're doing enough that you can make a decision on whether or not you need to move forward. One of the things I think people mistake sort of prototype or at least early delivery is that it has to be in-game. Like obviously it's great if it's in-game, brilliant, but it's not necessarily the fastest way to get to a prototype. One way I think of working which is good is if you have your own proprietary engine that's in development, you might want to use say Unreal or Unity or something to knock out a quick prototype so you can get the idea across even though you're not going to use that for the final delivery. On Miles Morales, there's an example, like we were doing the programmable matter. If you've played, has anyone played Spider-Man Miles Morales? Is there any? A few, right? The rest of you don't know what I'm talking about. That's fine. If you had played the game, done your research, then it would have been okay. So in that game, the Tinkerer has this stuff that forms, changes into different weapons. It's programmable matter. And in order for us to actually get a prototype working in game, would have taken ages, and that'll have a lot of our R&D, on dev. We actually outsourced it to a viz dev, external studio. I don't think they even were a game studio. I think it was a VFX studio, and they did like a render. So it was just a movie, and we're like, yeah, fine, we know that's going to look good. And even though it's super high res and we're not going to get that fidelity, it sells it. And it was a week versus months to get that. So the investment was good. Yeah, and sometimes it could just be a sketch. It could be 3 storyboard panels instead of writing a script and getting VO recorded. There's really quick ways to prototype everything. With all of this, it's important to make sure that, like I talked about before, that there is a sort of a point of no return. And once that cutoff is met, you're going to have to cut probably, but you can still move the deadline in scope. You didn't need to now think, okay, what are the knock-on effects on the rest of the departments? Or what are we going to drop off the game in order to get this done now? Is it worth it? All that stuff. The producers will love this, I think, in the room. Too much, too little Jira. Generally, there's never too little. There's never too little. I've never found a problem with too little Jira. And this isn't an attack on producers. What this is about thinking of Jira as a feature in and of itself. So we use Jira because it's game dev and people use Jira. Like, that's not good enough, right? Like, what is the problem we're solving with Jira? Like, what's it like? Oh, we need a burn down rate. Why do we need a burn down rate? Does the artist care about burn down? Not really. They want to know that they don't have to work overtime, and they want to know that the stuff they're doing is going to have enough polish for the final delivery. So it's more about thinking about your end user. Has the art team or whatever been consulted? Are they getting much out of it? And really, like, are you making the whole team's work easier, or are you making it harder? Right, and that's kind of red tape, and Jira gets Jira is an amazing tool if it's used right. You can have really simple Kanban boards. You don't even have to see any of the back end if it's done properly. You can integrate it with Trello. Artists love Trello. So there are ways of using Jira in a way that get what you need on the back end side from a producer point of view, but also serve the dev. 27 minutes. Okay, so this is the gate cadence, which I'll just quickly go through. I like 8-week deliveries. I like 8-week milestones. That's what we did at Insomniac. I think that's what we did at Crytek. It's been so long now. And what you're looking at there is in week 8, you're planning the next milestone, and that's more the leadership. And week 1, you're doing all the kickoffs. So you're getting a good flow from week 2 to week 6. And by flow, I mean you're reducing the meeting overhead. You're letting people do the work and get the work done because the work has been clearly defined. And then you should probably have your director feedback. So the directors will play all the game and have a really good list of feedback for week 6 so that the team have time to actually implement that for the delivery on week 8. And then you have stabilization as well. That's not AI. That's a real dog, apparently. I want to be that happy. Maybe I'm in the wrong industry. So buy-in, I'm going to touch on 2 areas, which is brainstorming from the team, getting the team involved, and then the managing up side of things. And there is peer, managing sideways, and I'm sort of booking it all in managing up. Proper brainstorming. I strongly recommend, even if you have a studio where everyone's in-house, that you use a remote style collaboration over, Zoom or whatever, and use FigJam. I feel like, no disservice to Miro, but I just feel like FigJam is more user-friendly. Maybe that's my artist sensibility. It's really, really good for collaborating. It beats having a whiteboard and moving Post-its around and all that. It's just the best way. Everyone can participate, vote on things. I think that 15 minutes. I hope you learned something already, because we only have 15 minutes left. Yes, I would say if you can find someone on your team, probably a writer, or UX maybe, who will have done brainstorming in some capacity, or you can send someone to get training to do it properly in a way that encourages conversation and gets everyone communicating, that there isn't people left out, all that sort of stuff. It'll pay dividends to get the best brainstorming experience you can. Like, we had total flop brainstorms, and we had amazing brainstorms at Insomniac on the same project. Once we included writing and other people, and we shifted around. So I'm no expert on it, but I know a bad one, I know a good one. Okay, managing up. So essentially, you know, this is about putting, you can choose which is the director here and which is not the director. Who's managing up? So if you might put yourself in the shoes of a director or a leader, and you're like, oh God, there's so many things, I'm not looking at it anymore. You know, I have these sign off every whatever, 8 weeks, 4 weeks or whatever. I hope it's going well, right? And they have that going up for all of these plates. So just make it easy for them, you know, communicate often. If you are doing proposals for changes that they weren't originally included, like, you know, in the prototype phase maybe, just include the problem statement, then maybe have options for solutions, right? Make everything succinct, like more succinct than me, definitely. One of the big ones is, which we really did a lot on Spider-Man, which was knowing what Marvel were going to talk about with us, or what Sony were going to come back with. It's like Mark Cerny, what he was probably going to want to fix. You know, what Ted was going to want, and all the executive team at Insomniac. So we knew already because we were all in sync at that point, you know, we've been working together for years. But what we did was, we didn't just sit on that relationship, right? We would write up all of our feedback of how we were going to address those issues before we had the review. So when you went to the review, they're like, well, we've noticed it's quite noisy and I don't know where to go. It's like, yeah, what we're going to do is in week 2, next milestone, John is going to do a lighting pass, and that should bring, you know, do you know what I mean? So when the director goes into their meeting, they're like, oh, cool, I don't have to, you know, worry. They've got this. That annoying phrase. So make it easy for them to approve, understand, and leave you to it. And that's the same really managing sideways too, because there might be, say, the cinematic team who are worried about the art team, you know, dumping a load of props in their cinematic, which happens all too often. And you just build trust and framework so that sort of stress is reduced. Okay, quality control. As I said, this is when you're looking at stuff that isn't like really up to scratch. And maybe it's delivered on time, but it's not really where you want it to be. The first one, of course, is real sign-off. So, yeah, it is AI. Well done. I don't know how you, just without prompting. So sign-off means something. So what that means is that everyone says, that's it, no more changes. And of course, it's game dev, right? So loads of changes. But it just means that after that sign-off, you can't just make changes for the sake of it. You have to get a re-sign-off from everybody involved before you do the action. So it's no more do now and apologize later. You're past that phase. You're now like, can we do it? Will it make it better? And it's a proper assessment, right? So you're slowing down that iteration a bit, but for a reason, because it will blow your budget otherwise. Again, if any of this stuff isn't happening, that's time for looking at your cutoff and looking at your scope, how to achieve it in a better way. Success rates here. I've got a few Lego themed slides coming up. Problem statements. So, I've talked about a problem statement. It is something that you actually will use a lot if you haven't used that terminology. When somebody goes, and you're like, okay, calm down. What's the problem statement? Like, just tell me, what is the problem? Is the player annoyed by playing? What is the problem statement? What are we actually trying to fix? I don't want a solution. I want a problem statement. And then why are we trying to fix it? Make sure you get that information when you're being asked to do anything, or make sure you have that information when you're asking it. This is my, business partner was sort of included the so that statement. So we are making an X-wing because we want the problem statement is there's Lego everywhere and it's a waste, and we want to clean it up. So we're going to make an X-wing so that everyone is impressed at our Lego skills. So you know why you're doing it and what success looks like. It's a terrible example, but you get the idea. And then you need to know when it's going to be delivered. Another way of doing that is with SMART, S-M-A-R-T goals. It's basically the same thing. It's just an acronym that you can use. Any UX people in here? 2? Any more? Come on, woo again. Yeah. UX is super important. Yeah. And anyone think that UI and UX are the same thing? Raise your hands. Don't raise your hands. Yeah, okay, good. UI and UX are not the same thing. UX is super important. UX is basically, I think we were saying the only time you wouldn't need UX is if you were making a game that you didn't even play yourself. So you're just at home, you write a load of code, and then you're like, right, that's done. Then otherwise you're using UX, right? Like even you playing your own game is UX at a certain point. So what I will say is that I can't stress how important it is to get UX in a game in AAA. It's absolutely necessary. If you have an indie studio, I would put it up there with design director, art director, game director or whatever, and UX director, UX team, whatever. I guess you could outsource this stuff, but I think it's tricky because of the nature of it. So yeah, you get all these things: better playtests, better metrics, better questions, better feedback, better role, better. And I have this picture which I don't know. UI people, UX, oh shit, excuse me, UX people. I'm sorry if that doesn't actually explain your job. What the point of that image is to illustrate that it is complicated. It's not something that anyone can just go, yeah, I get it, I can do that. Much like writing, everyone thinks they can do it, but it's not so easy. And one of the things that a UX will help is get to gather feedback correctly, because it is a skill. Getting bias and removing bias, all that kind of stuff, as well as metrics, to know where you want to be. Do make sure this is not necessarily UX related, but that you're getting your feedback in the right state of production. You don't want to get like, oh, well, we need to have a new LUT for this level and the lighting isn't got enough bounces and the RTX hasn't been turned on. And you're giving this feedback to a designer who's like, yeah, but we only worked on it for a day and it's grey box. Like, well, why are you giving me this feedback now? And I've actually seen that kind of thing happen. It does. And then the other end, where you're like, do we really need a combat in our game? And it's like, we're going to deliver it in 2 weeks. So yeah, and then you get that. I've talked about that. One thing for director, my point at director is drive-by. So I used to do this and I still do it. It's so tempting to want to be there in the team and yeah, let's do this together. But that's okay. But make sure it's all tracked. You don't just, because I think it's really important that even if you have a principal, if you go to their desk and they go, director's at my desk, and they say, you know what I really like? I'd really like if there was a ribbon on, hanging off that hook. That would be great, wouldn't it? And then the person is like, must do ribbon now. Like that's what happens in their head. All other priorities in the bin. Doesn't matter if the critical crash, I have to put ribbon. So really be aware of that. 8 minutes, 7 minutes, 6 minutes. Okay, so action feedback, same kind of thing. There's your usual way of getting feedback. How you action it, depending on how expert and thorough your UX, will depend on how successful your actioning of feedback is. Good director will be your best directors and your art directors will be naturally UX oriented, so they'll probably be playing it and simulate playing it in their head all the time when they're looking. So if you have a good director, they're probably giving you good feedback. But one of the things that we do need to be aware of, especially in our neurodivergent world and inclusivity, is to make sure we're giving feedback in a way that the person who's doing the actions, are implementing, are able to understand it and get to it as quickly as possible. So, for example, with the art team, environment art, generally instead of like having 40 tasks for this block in Manhattan, of all these little things, I would just say, go to tile HG, and in this folder, here's all the images, and I'd use Snagit to write up notes on like 40 images, and then they just go through, do it all in one go, submit it with one change list, which arguably isn't great, but it's a good way for the artist to work, rather than them just like spending time in Jira going, oh. The feedback sometimes will affect the deadline. For example, Mary Jane. People didn't like Mary Jane. in the MJ in Spider-Man, and that's her name, right? Yeah. Cool. I don't like Spider-Man. Okay, so yeah, they didn't like her, so it was like, oh, okay, we really need to like do something about it. We need to rewrite dialogue. We need to look at there, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Okay, actually we're at the end, so it's grand. So there was a big effort where it was dropped. Like it's really important that you like her, obviously for obvious reasons, right? So it was like, okay, cinematics team, we really need to go back, and actually it ended up being a lot about lighting and rendering. So there was a real shift in focus for the core team and the tech art team to get a bit further ahead than they had thought at that point in development. But it had knock-on effects, so other stuff had to be reduced in scope. Okay, so we're at the end. Recap. So, as I said, the process is BOSS. What it looks like is it's a process, it's visualized, everybody can see it, they understand where it starts, where it ends, where they're involved. You have your gates, you stick to them. You have your phases, again, director one. If your director isn't like on board with this stuff, I would highly encourage chatting to them about it and saying, well, why can't we have a vision document at this point? There could be a good reason, but the risks need to be laid out if you don't have that stuff. Also, do they understand the vision document? I worked with a client recently, and they had the vision documents, but it was impossible to parse. So I worked with them to rewrite the vision document, and then the art team were like, "Oh, okay, I get it now." It wasn't like they didn't know what to do, but I hadn't presented it in a way that an outsider could understand it. What it's solving, bottlenecks, ambiguity, overburdened directors, buy-in, lack of autonomy. Yes, well done. There, which one? What? Yeah, I don't know what you said, but I agree. I mean, I used AI to do spell checks as well, so technically, I am a robot. So it's just a part of the puzzle. I know everyone says that, but it is really important that process is fine on it, to say you need to do process, but it won't work if you don't have one process on one team. Even on Spider-Man, my Marvel, Miles Morales, when we moved on to Spider-Man 2, the same process didn't work because the producer was different, the creative director was different, the art director was different. So at that level, they had a different way of working, which I preferred Miles' way of working personally. It was more fun. But even if you've got a process, you need to tweak it. Some of the things you need to look at is how you do your meeting cadence. If you are having the same meeting cadence in week 1 as in week 4, and it's just really overburdening the team, the process is going to start to fall apart. You need to make sure that they all align. Workplace culture, obviously, if you're afraid to ask questions, or you're afraid because of the way you look, or who you are, you're not going to have autonomy and creativity anyway. You should probably just get out. But if you want that autonomy, you need to have that culture. Asynchronous communication is vital, and what I mean by that is basically Slack. People recording meetings, having good wiki page documentation, stuff like that, so that you can all find out what you need to find out when you have time and when you're maybe outside of your flow. I talked about this at all, but one major thing here is think of your process as a feature of itself. So once you've done the process, you're going to do a retrospective or a post-mortem or whatever and see where it went wrong, where it went right, and then adjust. So on Miles, we started with 6 weeks, and then it went to 7 and 8 weeks on the milestone, then it went to 10 weeks, and then it went back to 8 weeks. It wasn't always the same. We were always shifting just to check. And also different stages of development, like alpha versus pre-pro, things work differently. So just constantly evaluate. And as promised, here is a picture of me and socials. So please keep the conversation going if you're interested in this. I know process isn't the sexiest of subjects, but it's so important. I'd love to continue talking about it. Reach out to me, or you can ask me questions now. I believe we have some question time. Oh, thank you. Hello.
I have one question. If
Yeah.
communication is the key, is it possible or is it a myth that team members will become over-informed?
I don't believe so. There's different philosophies, right? I believe in transparency, so that if all the information's out there and people know about that, the people who need the information will feel included and can get it, and the people who don't can back off. Now, one example of over-informing that I do think is a problem is team meetings. So you have the whole team, and they have to meet for half an hour. Sometimes I even heard somebody saying every day recently. It's like makes me anxious. It's so you're not necessarily giving more information, but you're reducing everyone's time for the same amount of information. So what I would say is look at how information is shared, and looking at all your meetings and making sure can it be done in a more efficient way. Like, for example, stand-ups. You have stand-ups every day. But if you're doing your stand-ups in Slack, which is what we used to do, so you would just post what you're going to work on and some images and stuff, then the producers, everybody knows what's going on, but nobody's wasting time. Or if somebody started at 7 in the morning and all these stand-ups are at 9 and 10, now their flow is broken, they don't have to break that. You know? Yeah, I don't think that people can be over-informed. It's overstimulated, yes. So like you need to manage how Slack is used, you know, you need to manage how, like if they're getting too many emails and things like that. So overstimulated is slightly different, but that can be problematic depending on
So
you.
it's about the technique, how you...
Yeah, how do you present what's the best way to get the people who want to know that information or need to know information to have that information? And also redundancy, right? Some people think that, I used to think that having one place, a source of truth, was the best. But much like good sort of, I think, user interfaces or user experiences, that you want to be able to find the information at how you like to look for information. So if you have it on a wiki page or a blog or in Slack, and or even on email, the people who like those forms of communication will naturally be able to find them instead of like going to the thing they hate, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Hey, hello. First of all, let me say it's an amazing talk.
Oh, thank you.
So thanks for this. I'm kind of wondering, because you're talking a lot about the process, right? But what kind of methods would you suggest to use in a remote environment where enforcing this kind of process is, I would say, much more difficult? To like not to be stuck on meetings and calls all the time?
Yeah, I actually think it's easier, personally, remote. Maybe it's my personality type, you know. Like different people work different ways, and I think that's the trickiest part, is like how to give information to the people in the way they want it. Like if you look at in an office, right, you have meetings. Like I would be late, and when you were working on Spider-Man, I would be late for every meeting because I was in a meeting until 5 past the hour on every meeting. And everyone was like that. So the inefficiencies crept up. So there was a lot of problems. Whereas with online meetings, you can go, oh, and you're in the other meeting. You know. I also think you're much easier to record stuff and have it like asynchronous. And the one thing that happens a lot in studios is people don't share the information. It's more word of mouth because the word of mouth works. But it doesn't work when it doesn't. So, and you don't know when what you don't know. Okay, so you'll have maybe a bunch of people who are talking about something, and normally it would be shared, but somebody goes on holiday or they're sick for 2 days, and then they come back and it really is like difficult to catch up, and it's stressful to catch up. Whereas with online, I've just found that the information is always there. So whenever I want to come back, like when I was working with Sony recently as a client, I was only working part-time. I was consulting once or twice a week, and I would come in and I would be able to catch up within an hour because I had asked them to use an asynchronous form of documenting everything. So it was much easier for people to find. So I actually think it's easier online. But like with anything, it's sort of, what are you trying to achieve? You know, like asking all those questions. What's the problem statement you're trying to solve? And then in a studio environment, you can maybe solve it in one way, and then online another way. But it should be easy enough to get to that as long as you're clear. I think clarity of the problem statement is, although I've said, you know, it's important. It's not always easy. You know, you're like, this isn't great. What isn't great about it? Right. One way is writing the meeting goal and agenda, and being really. Not like, yeah, we're going to chat, you know, like being really clear about what is you're actually doing. Because then when you write it, you're like, you know what, I'm just going to send a message to a group. Like, this isn't a meeting, you know. Does that answer? You know?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, cool. Hello.
First of all, great talk, I gotta say. But I had a question, because I think this whole process, it definitely seems easier to do when you have a linear game, right? When you have a game where every bit follows one another. But I wonder if you can share your experiences as to what happens when you scale up to an open world game, or a game where you have more processes, where you have to have all the mechanics come together at the end to make it work. And it's hard to separate those features and be able to tell in isolation, oh, this makes sense, oh, this doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
So imagine a game of poker. Like, how are you going to be able to prototype a poker? You gotta need all the cards to make poker work, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
how do
yeah.
you distill it into like distinct features like this, like you had in
Yeah.
the presentation?
That's a really good question. It's a great question. And I'm lucky enough to have worked in, you know, the big open world games where there are lots of sort of games within the game. It's much like everything, you know, when you're planning something, you've got to break it down, right? So like the card thing, where first of all, do we need a card game? What is it solving? Right, we should have a card game. Then, can you play it? Okay, you can play. Is it fun? No. All right, we should make it fun. I mean, you know, it's like steps, right? So one of the big things, like open world, isn't really that hard because you can subdivide it. You know, it's physical, virtual physical space, so you can subdivide it in a way. And then like races and all those side content, they can all be done as their own process. You know, I think boss fights or puzzles are the two major ones for the types of game I've worked on. So boss fight is basically the feature group is everyone.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
You know, like boss fights are nuts. Like our boss fight time, we would say, well, we're great to have another boss. How much will that take? 9 months.
Right, because you
Or a
need a new
year.
feature, you need programmers involved, you need a lot of art, right? You need everyone involved.
Yeah, and you need to iterate a lot because boss fights they're not as intuitive as you think because you're often adding in new gameplay just for that thing, you know, or you're presenting it in a different way. So that, for example, will be very clear what the so for Sandman in spoiler, well, not really, for Spider-Man 2. That was like we were going to do that from early on. We want a big, spectacular, better than a Marvel movie moment, right? So there was criteria of what that needed to be. So there's a lot of concept art, and the design doc took longer. Then getting it, there was a stage of can we do this as a visual thing? Besides the gameplay. Then later on, once we were confident that that could be achieved visually, we got Brian Matheson, who's like, it's an amazing designer. He's just out there. So he came in and was like, yeah, we'll do this and this and this and this and this. So, and he broke it down into sections that became their own little mini levels. So it's kind of like, it's really like not looking at it as one big thing. Because like if you're saying the process is start game, end game, it's like, you know, it's, you know, you break it down, break it down, break it down. And obviously the more experienced people you have, like for Miles Motion, we had James Ham, who was doing the animation. And he became the kind of feature owner for Traversal with a designer. Because, and also narrative, you know, because he could relate better to the character than some of us. And he would do some of the stunts himself. You know, he'd go to the ball pit. It was like terrifying to watch, you know, where he backflips. But so we had an animator, which wouldn't necessarily, I mean, yes, traversal's animation is important, but it's more the feel that's important than animation. But he was there, like, you know, right included. So, yeah, I guess I'm rambling now.
No, it's all good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for coming.
We'll see you again after a short break.